Hello, all. It is officially time for Tuesday's Tales. And today's story that won based on your votes is Curious George Flies a Kite by Margaret Ray. I love this book. It's going to be so fun. And our Bible story for today is Daniel and the Lion's Den. It's going to be great. So let's start. Let's see who's online with us. So glad to see all of you with us today. This is George. He lives in the house of the man with the yellow hat. George is a little monkey, and all monkeys are curious, but no monkey is as curious as George. That's why his name is Curious George. I have to go out now, said the man with the yellow hat. Be a good little monkey until I get back. Till I come back. Have fun and play with your new ball. But don't be too curious. And the man went out. Hey, Ashley. It was a lot of fun for George to play with his big new ball. The ball went up, and George went up. And the ball went down, and George went down. George could do a lot of tricks with his ball, too. This was one of the tricks. He could get up on the ball like this, or do it this way with his head down. This was another trick George could do. He could hold the ball on his head like this. Look, no hands! What a good trick! But where did the ball go? George ran after it. The ball had gone into another room. Hey, Uncle Scott. Hey, Grammy. There was a big window in the room. George liked to look out of that window. He could see a lot from there. He let the ball go and looked out. George could see Bill on his bike and the lake with a boat on it. There's the lake. I'm forgetting I'm in a mirror. But there's the lake. And where's Bill on his bicycle? There it is. George could see a big house with a little garden and a little house in a big garden. The big house was the house where Bill lived. But who lived in the little house? George was curious. Who could live in a house that was so little? George had to find out. So he went to the big garden. The garden had a high wall, but not too high for a monkey. George got up on the wall, and all he had to do now was jump down. So George jumped down into the big garden. Now he could take a good look at the little house. And what did he see? A big white bunny and lots of little bunnies. George looked and looked and looked. Bunnies were something new to him. How funny they were. The big bunny was Mother Bunny. She was as big as George. But the little bunnies were so little that George could hold one of them in his hand. And that is what he wanted to do. How could he get a bunny out of the house? A house must have a door to get in and to get out. But where was the door to the bunny house? Oh, there it was. George put his hand in and took out a baby bunny. What fun it was to hold a baby bunny. And the bunny did not mind. It just sat in his hand, one ear up and one ear down and looked at George, and George looked back at it. Oh, I love bunnies. Now he and the bunny could play in the garden. They could play a game. They could play Get the Bunny. George would let the bunny hop away, and then he would run after it and get it back. George put the bunny down. Then he looked away. 1, 2, run! The bunny was off like a shot. George did not look. Now he had to wait a little. 1, 2, 3, 4. He waited. Then George looked up. Where was the bunny? He could not see it. Where was it? Where had it gone? George looked for it here, and he looked for it there. He could not find it. Where was the bunny? It could not get out of the garden. It could not get up the wall the way George could. It could not fly away. It had to be here. But it was not. The bunny was gone, and all the fun was gone too. George sat down. He had been a bad little monkey. Why was he so curious? Why did he let the bunny go? Now he could not put it back into the bunny house where it could be with Mother Bunny. Mother Bunny. George looked up. Why, that was it. Mother Bunny could help him. George got up. He had to have some string. Maybe there was some in the garden. Yes, there was a string. And a good one, too. George took the string and went back to the bunny house. What do you think he's going to do? Mother Bunny was at the door. George let her out and put the string on her, and Mother Bunny knew what to do. Away she went with her head down and her ears up. All George could do was hold the string and run after her. And then Mother Bunny sat down. She saw something, and George saw it too. Something white that looked like a tail, like the tail of the baby bunny. And that is what it was. But where was the rest of the bunny? It was down in a hole. A bunny likes to dig a hole and then go down and live in it. But this bunny was too little to live in a hole. It should live in a bunny house. So George got hold of its little white tail and pulled the baby bunny out. And Mother Bunny just stays there. Good job. Then they all ran back to the bunny house. George did not have to put a string on the baby bunny. It ran after its mother all the way home. George took the string off Mother Bunny and helped them back into the house. Then Mother Bunny and all the little ones lay down to sleep. George looked at them. It was good to see the baby bunny back where it should be. And now George would go back where he should be. When he came to the wall, he could see something funny in back of it. George got up on the wall to find out what it was. He saw a long string on a long stick. A fat man had the long stick in his hand. What could the man do with a stick that long? George was curious. The fat man was on his way to the lake. And soon George was on his way to the lake too. The man took a hook out of his box, put it on a string, and then put something on the hook. Then the man let the string down into the water and waited. Now George knew. The string on the stick was to fish with. When the man pulled the string out of the water, there was a big fish on the hook. George saw the man pull one fish after another out of the lake till he had all the fish he wanted. What fun it must be to fish! George wanted to fish too. He had his string. All he needed was a stick, and he knew where to get that. George ran home as fast as he could. In the kitchen, he took the mop off the kitchen wall. The mop would make a good stick. Now George had the string and the stick. He was all set to fish. Or was he? Not yet. George had to have a hook, and on the hook something that fish like to eat. Fish would like cake. Okay. And George knew where to find some. But where could he get a hook? Why, there was a hook for the mop on the kitchen wall. It would have to come out. With the hook on the string, and the string on the stick, and the cake in the box in his hand, George went back to the lake. George sat down, put some cake on the hook, and he let the line down into the water. Now he had to wait, just as the man had waited. George was curious. The fish were curious too. All kinds of fish came to look at the line. Big fish and little fish, fat fish and thin fish, red fish and yellow fish, and blue fish. One of them was near the hook. The cake was just what he wanted. George sat and waited. Then the line shook. There must be a fish on the hook. George pulled the line up. The cake was gone, but no fish was on the hook. Too bad. George put more cake on the hook. Maybe this time he would get a fish. But no! The fish just took the cake off the hook and went away. Well, if George could not get the fish would not get the cake. George would eat it. He liked cake too. He would find another way to get a fish. George looked into the water. That big red one there with the long tail. It was so near, maybe he could get it with his hands. George got down as low as he could and put out his hand. Splash! Into the lake he went. The water was cold and wet, and George was cold and wet too. This was no fun at all. When he came out of the water, Bill was there with his kite. My, you're wet, Bill said. I saw you fall in, so I came to help you get out. Too bad you did not get a fish. But it's good the fish did not get you. Now I can show you how high my kite can fly, Bill went on. Bill put his bike up near a tree, and then they ran off. There was a lot of wind that day. That's just what they needed. The wind took the kite up fast. George was too little to hold it in this wind. A kite that big could fly away with him. So Bill had to hold it. George saw the kite go up and up and up. What fun it was to fly a kite. They let the kite fly for a long time till Bill said, I will get the kite down now. I must go home, and you should too. But when Bill pulled the string in, the kite got into the top of a high tree. Bill could not get it down. Oh, my fine new kite! I cannot let go of it. I must have it back, Bill said, but the tree is too high for me. But no tree was too high for George. He went up to the top of it in no time. Then, little by little, he got the string out of the tree. Down he came with the kite and gave it back to Bill. "Thank you, George. Thanks a lot," Bill said. "I'm so happy to have the kite back. Now you may have a ride home on my bike. I will run back to the lake and get it. You wait here for me with the kite, but do not let it fly away." George looked at the kite. Then he took the string in his hand. He knew he could not fly the kite in this wind, but maybe he could let it go up just a little bit. George was curious. He let the string go a little, and a little bit more, and then a little more, and a little more. When Bill came back, there was no kite, and there was no George. "George!" he called. "Where are you?" Then he looked up. There they were, way up in the sky. Bill had to get help fast. He would go to the man with the yellow hat. The man would know what to do. Oh dear, this is not looking good. "George is not here," said the man with the yellow hat when Bill came. "Have you seen him?" "George and my kite are up in the sky near the lake," Bill shouted. "I came to—" But the man did not wait to hear any more. He ran to his car and jumped in. "I will get him back," he said. "I must get George back." Page stuck. All this time the wind took the kite up and George with it. It was fun to fly about in the sky, but when George looked down, the fun was gone. He was up so high that all the big houses looked as little as bunny houses. George did not like it a bit. He wanted to get down, but how? Not even a monkey can jump from the sky. George was scared. What if he never got back? Maybe he would fly on and on and on. Oh, he would never, never be so curious again. If just this one time he could find a way to get home. What was that? George could hear something, and then he saw something fly in the sky just like a kite. It was a helicopter, and in the helicopter, hurrah, was the man with the yellow hat. Down from the helicopter came a long line. George got a hold of it, and the man with the yellow hat pulled him up. George held on to the kite, for he had to give it back to Bill. "I am so happy to have you back, George," said the man with the yellow hat. "I was scared, and you must have been scared too. I know you will not want to fly a kite again for a long, long time. You must give it back to Bill when we get home." "Hurrah!" Bill shouted when George came to give him the kite. "George is back, and my kite is back too." And then Bill took George by the hand and went with him into the little garden. And from the little garden into the big garden where the bunny house was. "Here is one of my baby bunnies," Bill said. "Take it. It's for you. A baby bunny for George." George took it in his hands and held it way up. It was his bunny now. He would take it home with him. And that is what he did. The end. I love that book. That was great. And now, per request and per vote, we have our Bible story for tonight. It is called Daniel and the Scary Sleepover. For those of y'all tuning in, this is Tuesday's Tales. We just finished Curious George and how he flew a kite. And now we are reading Daniel and the Scary Sleepover. And for those adults tuning in, you can find the adult version in Daniel chapter 6. Here we go. Things were not looking good for God's people. They had been captured and taken far from home, and now they were slaves to the king of Babylon. But God had not left his people. He was with them, and he was looking after them. Daniel loved God and obeyed him. Now God made Daniel able to understand lots of difficult things, so it wasn't long before the king of Babylon noticed him. King Darius liked how clever Daniel was, so he made Daniel his most important helper of all and put him in charge of lots of other helpers. That's a cool king hat, just like to say. But the other helpers didn't like this. They wanted the king to like them best. They wanted to get rid of Daniel, so they spied on Daniel. They tried to find things wrong with Daniel, things that they could tell the king, things that they could, but there weren't any. None. They couldn't find anything at all, except there was just the one thing. Every day, 3 times a day, without fail, no matter what, Daniel went to his room, closed the door, and prayed. They smiled to themselves. Let's get the king to make a law. No one is allowed to pray to anyone except to the king. Daniel won't obey this law and he will be punished. They were pleased with themselves for being so clever and hurried off to tell the king. The king liked their idea. He didn't know they were tricking him, so he made it into a law. Everyone must pray, only to me. If you don't, the lions will have you for their dinner. Daniel heard this. He knew it was wrong to pray to anyone except God. He had to do what God said, whatever it cost him, even if it meant he would die. So Daniel went to his room, closed the door, and prayed. Well, I like holding the book this way. Okay. That's just what the bad man knew Daniel would do. They skipped straight off to tell the king, "Oh, your most glittering highness, your law says, does it not, that everyone must pray to you alone, sire?" "Yes," said the king. "Oh, magisterial brightness." "Then correct us if we're wrong, but it would seem that Daniel is praying to God, not to you." The king was sad. He had been tricked. He didn't want to hurt Daniel, but he couldn't change his law, and so he let the soldiers throw Daniel to the lions. May your God, who you love so much, rescue you. Ooh, those lions look hungry. Oh dear. The king went back to his palace, but he didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. He tossed and turned until finally, at the first glimmer of dawn, he leaped out of bed and ran straight to the den. "Daniel," he cried, "has your God rescued you?" "Yes," Daniel shouted. God sent an angel to close the lion's mouth. Well, that's good news. See, look, there's Daniel. Right there. Check it out. He's just sitting with those little lions like they're kitty cats. That's really cool. And then, his head on Daniel's lap was the biggest lion, purring like a little kitten. The king brought Daniel out of the den. "Look," he said, "Daniel doesn't even have a scratch." The king made a new law. Daniel's God is the true God, the God who rescues. Pray to him instead. God would keep on rescuing his people, and the time was coming when God would send another brave hero, like Daniel, who would love God and do what God said, whatever it cost him, even if it meant he would die, and together they would pull off the greatest rescue the world has ever known. Dun, dun, dun. They're talking about Jesus, just in case you weren't sure. Well, that was awesome. I loved sharing that with you. Now, next week's story choices, are you ready? Are Where the Wild Things Are, or Lily's Purple Plastic Purse. This book, I'm not going to lie, this book is my jam, but I'm not going to sway the votes. It's your vote. So, Where the Wild Things Are, or Lily's Purple Plastic Purse. Those will be our stories for next week. Also, our Bible story next week will be between Joseph and the Coat of Many Colors and David and Goliath. So we'll put those up for vote next week. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It's been so great to share stories with you each week, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Goodbye.